Warning. The following video contains spoilers for the inner workings and behind-the-scenes processes of the Project 863 series. If you do not wish to be spoiled on future or past videos, nor have the spell of the series broken, you have been warned. Welcome to Behind 863. This is podcast episode number 5.
Woo,
we made it to
Cinco.
5 episodes.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
It's lit.
It's lit.
Tanner, should we be matching the next time we do a podcast?
Yeah, what are you two
Look at
doing
Tanner's
this weird,
shirt.
like...
I love
Hey, man.
it.
It's like that Nick Miller...
Father, son.
It's like that New Girl episode where Nick Miller is like working at the bar and then that older guy comes and is like, I'm you from the future. That's what you two look like right now.
Oh,
Thanks.
yeah.
That guy was old.
No, you're not as old. But
Okay.
Well, if you could give Woods advice right now for like Woods and
Woods is like, I
7
didn't
years.
ask for this.
Yeah,
Say it with your chest.
And then what else? Give me 2 more things.
not my diaphragm.
Speak up. What you say matters.
What you say matters.
Great
advice.
Don't everybody take that advice, okay? I don't want to hear all your dumb
Yeah.
ideas. Sorry, that's,
I want to hear all your dumb ideas.
that kind of like went to a hush. I was expecting a
hey,
no, I
laugh.
thought
after
that
it.
was
didn't say
funny.
it mattered to me.
Yeah.
I just said it matters.
Just
But
to
take
you.
that as
To
somewhere else.
someone.
Yeah, but throw it away. By the way.
It matters to the trash can because you got to fill it up.
Did you see that move by itself?
That's a dad joke.
What?
This microphone literally
Like
just
that?
moved by itself.
It's a ghost.
What are you guys
Speaking of
talking about?
ghosts, Woods and I, we're going to talk about a lot of things today.
Sick.
Woods and I shot
What's she giggling?
our, I'm trying not to say
Eyes
like so
out.
much, but I feel like I just really want to say and like, you know?
They're filler words. You don't need them.
It's like my
They
thing.
mean nothing.
I just love being like,
Says the girl that says like every
I
word.
do.
I say,
I'm working on it.
And then I
Okay.
speak, I was watching the last podcast back, and I speak so fast. Whenever I'm thinking on the fly, I'm like, what's wrong with me?
Nothing's wrong with you.
My
you
brain-
just speak fast.
My
sir.
brain is like over here like cogs, and my mouth's like,
I don't like that sound.
I don't think
Do you
the
feel
audience did
sometimes
either.
that you're just observing? Observing?
Observing.
That's the word.
did you use a B?
I popped a B in there for some reason. It's like
Observing.
a B.
It's like absorbing.
Do you feel like sometimes you're observing yourself, just like talking, just
Yeah.
spewing out stuff?
I don't think too harshly on it because I remember we did that old podcast kind of thing with the other boys and I used to be more harsh on it when I was doing it back then, but then I realized people connect to normal speaking patterns.
Yes.
So it's like if you're over here speaking so perfectly, like that's fine, but like it doesn't make you sound any worse to use filler words because normal people use filler words every day. So I'm not too worried about it, but when I was watching the last one, Matt, Sam, and myself, I'm gonna use proper English, we were like having a deep philosophical conversation about like content and stuff, and I just realized every time I'm collecting this thought, it would click in my head. I could literally see it go click, and then I just rifling, like repeating words, like going through weird.
That's interesting.
It was just really weird to watch. Yeah, and it wasn't normal. Like that's what's weird. It just
Who
felt
says what's
jarring.
normal?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Me for myself.
But is it
You don't know
normal for
yourself.
you? Is it normal
You just
behavior
proved
for
you
you?
don't know yourself, though. So, moot.
That's a Drake quote.
That's interesting for me. It's like sometimes I'll just start and I'm not sure if I'll even be able to like finish what I'm trying to say. So like it's like it's loading as I'm saying it. That's why sometimes I take pauses.
But you don't. That's what I have to learn to do is just
I,
pause. You
Yeah,
you
it's
pause a
okay
lot.
to just like stop and think.
Yeah, stop and collect. Whereas I feel like I'm losing the battle with myself if I go and think. You know, so I have to get better at
Battle
that. Just
with
as a
yourself.
person,
That's so intense.
I'm very competitively. That's my thing. I'm collaborative with other people.
You're
I've had to
competitive
train
with
myself
yourself.
Very internally competitive.
Interesting.
If I feel like I lost, like if I don't feel like I did something better or I could be doing it better, or if I don't know how to do something better for myself, like to grow in something, that's when I feel a little bit of like internal tension.
Wow.
But with other people, I'm not like super competitive. Like I want other people to succeed because it doesn't affect my success. You know, it's like I just want them to be
Tea.
well off. You know,
Tea.
Well, you know what that reminds me of is our old writing meetings. Right when like we
Like
would
creator
we would,
meetings?
Yeah, the old creator meetings. We had Paul, like all of them. Everyone was very competitive with what ideas they wanted to get out, or like even jokes they were trying to say,
Yeah.
to the point where it was like frustrating. But I kind of see like you're really good at like jumping in, interrupting people, and
No, I don't take offense. I know. I'm good
Okay,
at
yeah,
that,
like in that type of environment, you know,
Yeah.
you kind of have to be loud and you have to get your idea in. But yeah, I see that. Yeah, I see that for sure.
Thanks.
Yeah,
I think.
dude. Yeah,
I don't know.
confirmed.
Thanks for telling me I'm good at interrupting others while speaking.
You got it, dude.
Hey, stop.
He just affirmed what you hate about yourself.
I didn't need it, but I appreciate
Yeah,
it.
you're right.
So yeah, this week let's go over some of the stuff we're shooting this week, and maybe some of the possible issues we faced.
Yeah.
A lot of the changes we've come across. I think again, this is so fun because every time we do a podcast, we say we are figuring it out. Like I really feel like we got a grip on it, and then we change everything the
Oh,
next
you're
week.
always going to be figuring it
Because
out.
we're
Yeah.
constantly going like this, you know. But every week it feels like you're here. Like it feels like you really are at the bottom. Like you just figured it out.
Not
To
for
me,
me,
at
it
least, I
doesn't.
feel like we come through ideas, and I'm
bottom.
like, think of it like a funnel, right?
Okay.
Reverse pyramid scheme.
Scheme?
You know, but like a funnel, like in
Mm.
a funnel, you know, you're always
Oh, like
narrowing it down.
we've finally figured out what we're doing.
Well, it's like an
Yeah, but it always
hourglass.
feels like we've narrowed it down. Like it always feels to me like,
I
oh, that
mean,
was it, and then it's
I-
like deeper.
Honestly, I feel like that's the nature of like being a production company that makes content for social media. Like it's always going to keep changing and we're
Adapt, yeah.
always going to have to adapt and run with a new idea, see how it works. Oh, that didn't work out. Okay, let's revisit
That's the
it. Like,
attractive thing about this job.
yeah.
Is that constant adapting for sure.
The chase.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The chase.
I feel that, and so that's what's interesting is the last I think 2 or 3 podcasts are like, hey, we're changing a lot. But we really feel like we're figuring it out right here. And I think we are, naturally. I'm not saying we're regressing by any means. But when we have these like writers meetings, these marketing meetings, these brainstorm meetings, I really feel like we come out and I'm like, dude, that is it. I'm like, I feel like that's going to pop. I feel like that's the one, you know? And then it doesn't.
And then
And then
it
we're
doesn't.
like,
It totally does.
turns out we have to go deeper. you
And then
know?
only 1,000 people watch the premiere. And
But
it's like,
I mean,
oh.
failure informs success, right? Like you can't
Facts.
really have success without first failing fast through
Yeah.
a lot of different ways, right? And so,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a bit of a bummer when you have an idea that you think is going to work and then it doesn't. Like that's definitely a bummer, but you know, as long as you can kind of push past that emotional block and look at, okay, what's the information that I'm getting out of this?
Yeah.
Then otherwise, then you are truly lost if you're not doing that. If you're just like sitting back in like, you know, the melancholy and being like, nobody wants to watch me anymore.
That
Yeah.
is the ticket, I would say, to success. And Matt said this previously. He hasn't said this to many people, but I remember the person
What?
Can't
he
wait to
said it
hear.
the person he said it to didn't listen. And I thought it was so fascinating. I'm not going to say who, but I was in the car during this whole thing, and I was like, yeah, that's absolutely it. And then the person just went and did the complete opposite.
What did he
But,
say?
Matt said,
What did I say?
Matt said the ticket to success is mimicry, and
yeah.
I think that is chef's kiss, and that's why
Say
YouTube,
more.
that's why we're good at YouTube. I think is we've always been good at mimicking, and like now we're doing something completely unique, which is
So,
difficult. But
yeah.
I think that's the battle. I feel like people can figure that out, but I feel like where people fail to execute on that idea is the emotional gap. Like there's an emotional point where you have to look at yourself and say you're not good enough with what you're doing right now. Well, you're good enough, but the content you're making isn't good enough, right?
Yeah.
And that you have to change and alter and do something better. I feel like a lot of people will either quit when it's not working because that's all they had, that's their only idea, or people will do the same thing even when it's failing. I saw a video of a lady who made 350 YouTube videos
Yeah.
and all of them get 200 views and she didn't change anything. Just the same thing. She's like,
And
why
maybe
isn't it
she's
working?
having fun.
Well, she was actually like seeking guidance for how to
Oh,
do better. So
gotcha.
like she's, I think she was struggling, but it's one of those things. Like there's an emotional part of yourself you have to be like you have to let go and look at it from the outside and like try new things, change things, and
Yeah.
mimic. You know,
Mimicry, yeah. Mimicry is critical. Mimicry is like, you know, how I define that really is more of you look at what's succeeding and you study it, you break it apart, you figure out what the components are, and then you put it back together in a way that's unique to you, but still containing all of the best parts that made it work, right? Yeah, people don't do that. I understand why, because it's a lot of work
Yeah.
it's a lot of work, and there's also some pride and stubbornness of like not wanting to go
say that.
your way and wanting it to work your
it's a
way.
pride kill. You have to admit that what you think is the best might not be the best.
Sure.
You have to like
True.
admit someone else is doing something better.
It requires a lot of openness. It requires a tremendous amount of openness because you like to be creative, you have to be open. That's just the way it is. That's just how creativity works. Like openness defined as the ability to entertain competing ideas at the same time. A lot of people think openness is all about acceptance, like I accept you and I accept you and I accept you. That has nothing to do with openness. It's actually dependent on what you're accepting of, right? But actual openness is the ability to entertain ideas while they might be competing without throwing one out and without judging, right?
Yeah.
So judgment is at certain times the antithesis of openness, right?
Yep.
And so if you judge something too quickly, right, then you're essentially saying it's bad or good. And we can do that. We have tools of discernment and judgment, and sometimes that's appropriate. But when you're judging things based on your projected emotions or your desires or some sort of broken belief, then you're not going to get too far. You're not going to get too far at all.
Yeah.
And there's other pieces where you see people mimicking, but too much. You're not actually making it better, right?
Or the
Like,
wrong
Sure.
thing. Yeah.
Yes, that drives
That's
me
I think the most
crazy.
common thing I've seen is people will mimic what isn't making something magical.
Yeah.
That's like I think the most common thing
Yeah,
I think see mimicked wrong is Rhett and Link. Like, I think people will be like, oh, we just got to sit down here with my friend and just do this
Or
thing.
Casey Neistat.
Do weird
People
things.
mimic him all the wrong,
Oh, too
all the
much.
wrong
Yeah.
ways,
Too
right?
much,
They think
and-
it's like, oh, it's all the editing. It's all like that, but it has like Casey Neistat blew up.
It's a storytelling.
It's all about his storytelling. It's all about how he engages the story as a person and how there's that authenticity to him, right?
Yeah.
That's him, like unapologetically him, which isn't necessarily a great thing, right? But it's an attractive thing to watch,
Yeah.
right? And so it's like, it's a dangerous thing because there's a lot of people are like really focused on, I got to be my true self. I got to be authentic. And I resonate with that silly Team Edge statement that's be yourself unless you suck.
Yeah.
There's a lot of truth to that because you can totally be authentic and just be a D-bag.
Yeah.
Total D-bag, right?
Yeah.
But you're still totally authentic, right? And so like there's certain things that you have to mimic and have to do, but you have to build up. You have to figure out, you have to piece the parts that are working and the parts that aren't, right? And so you have to kind of go into, let's say, something that's really working well and figure out the things that suck about it, take those out, infuse it with something new, and then you've got something going on, right? And that's honestly my strategy, and it's been my strategy since, getting out of high school. It was literally all it was. I was like, okay, I want to be successful on YouTube. What's blowing up right now on YouTube, and how can I attach something that I care about, something that I like to that without like letting go of all the things that people enjoy about that, but still infusing something that I like about it.
And iterate.
And iterate.
Yeah, iterating is like key. I think it's major
Yeah.
key, you could
Yeah.
say.
Major key.
Major key.
Yeah.
High key. But yeah, I mean, that's what we're doing here, right? Is we're iterating a lot. And I think it looks weird from the outside to a lot of people, but I think I don't think people see the value directly and instantly, right? Like
Yeah,
from the
you
outside.
can't. And we're doing it in public too, which is
That's-
like not a lot of people do. Like not a lot of people realize that we're actually like trying to come up with this prototype product in the wild, which is like not typically done. Like you don't do that. Like, and you don't do that because it
ugly.
confuses people and people are like, what's going on over
Yeah,
there?
what's
You know?
happening?
Messy.
But I mean, like really what we're doing too, not a lot of people are doing. So there's not a lot of mimicry happening, right?
Yeah.
And like we're trying to figure out how we can maintain our identity, so to speak. And maybe there's a little pride there, right? Coupled with what's actually working on the platform, right? Because there's a lot of things, let's say Chad Wild Clay, right? Guy gets massive views, right? And you could argue that's probably the closest parallel to the content that we do, right? There's like
Sure.
a story, it's fiction, it's like immersive.
The audience
it's
is
obviously
engaged.
the audience is super engaged.
It's YouTube vlog style content.
YouTube vlog style content, but it's for a younger demographic, right? And we're not really interested in making younger demographic content. There's nothing wrong with it. I have no issues with the content that Chad makes. I love the fact that he's killing it. He's such a good guy. Like he deserves that totally.
Yeah, he's
You know what
earned
I
it,
mean?
yeah.
He's earned it. But I think more specifically with like our content, it's like, okay, like there might be a level of like, well, do we play into that a little? Do we not? Like, how does that work? Like, when people were first watching, why were they first watching? And how do we accidentally iterate away from that? You know what I mean? Like, there's so many factors that go into that. But I think a bigger issue for us in this particular show is that we're actually trying to create something unique. And there's an inherent problem there. The inherent problem is the path isn't really forged for us. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of other things that people are doing that are similar, but it's not quite what we're doing. You know what I mean? Like, ARGs are similar to this, right?
There's like no one to mimic off of to get to that spot, right?
Yeah.
Like that's
But I also
that's a difficult position to be in.
yeah, I also think we missed the boat on, not missed the boat, that's not the right phrase. I also think we're not making great content right now. And so what I mean by that is, like, it's not that it's not great, but I'm like looking through like season 2, I'm like, oh yeah, that shouldn't have gotten views at all. You know what I mean? Like, retrospectively, obviously hindsight's 2020, but looking back on it, like, oh, okay, yeah, that shouldn't have gotten views because we like totally suffocated the parts that were magical about that and the parts that were, engaging to people, right? Like, we started off season 2 with no mystery. It was like, and this is so funny. We defined this. I felt so stupid, but this is so funny. I love this. In our writing meeting yesterday, we were trying to come up with mystery hooks, right?
Okay.
Because I think the boiling it all down, one of the things that we strayed away from in season 2 that was magical about season 1 and great about season 0 was deep mystery, right? Coupled with realism. Those are the two pieces. I think now, again, next week I might be back here being like, that wasn't it.
Hey, we're trying again.
Like, okay, new plan.
But I think that's the big piece, right? And so as we were like, everyone in the room was like coming up with tons of different mysteries. We were trying to define for next meeting of like, okay, I always like to narrow things down a little bit more. I give you all a prompt, and then I see what you guys make, and then if a bunch of stuff is unusable, I'm usually like, that's because I didn't narrow the prompt enough. It's not because you guys can't generate ideas.
Yeah.
So when I was really, really like a really, really early leader, I didn't think that was the case. I was like, I don't understand why some of these people are they can't come up with ideas.
Their brains
You know what I
suck.
mean?
The curse of knowledge, yeah.
And
It's a frustrating time.
but
everyone.
growing a lot more, realizing, oh no, like that's up to me, the leader, to make sure I define that prompt and I refine that to such a degree where the boundaries are really clear. Yeah, still some people might come up with something that are totally outside the boundaries that have been clarified, and that's the point where I'm like, were you paying attention? Because that's not what we're doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But so that's the big piece, right? So we're trying to go away and we're trying to define a little bit more like what's a mystery hook, right? And Tanner just straight up reads the definition of mystery, and I was like, "Oh, okay, that's it."
Totally connects.
Like,
yeah.
we were having
What's the
trouble.
definition of mystery?
Well, yeah,
Mike
we were
was-
having trouble. Like, I'll be perfectly frank with you. I didn't know it. Okay, so no shame if you don't know, but I'd like to see what you think
You
it
just
is.
have a general idea.
The definition
You just have a general idea.
is
Well,
I have it right here for when I have a word
yeah.
for word.
the excitement of the unknown.
No.
No,
See,
yeah.
I would have totally said something very similar to
Yeah,
that.
that
too,
didn't
'cause,
sound
like,
crazy the way
That
she said it.
didn't,
I was like, I
didn't
believe it.
sound crazy.
Mike had like pitched an idea and it sounded like a mystery.
Yeah.
But all of us were like,
But it's not.
that's like a thriller, but why?
or
And
or
it's
that's
just
like just a question,
and
but
we're all
why?
like going around the circle and we're like, it feels like it's already like answered the mystery part. Maybe we know too much about it.
Is it
and then
like
Tanner's
confusion?
And then
It's
so
confusion?
so even deeper, like harsher than that, I think, which is something that is difficult or impossible to understand or explain. And that's major key right
and that's
there.
right there
Oh.
for us. It was just like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
For
It
me,
has-
I started just
Like-
laughing in the meeting because I was like, now I understand why some of the hooks that I come up with aren't mystery, even
Yeah.
though
They're
they
impossible
look
to
like
explain.
it. Because we were
Yeah.
sitting there in the room, and Mike's like, "Is this a mystery?" And we're all looking at him, being like we all agree, I don't think so, but why? Like, we couldn't figure it out.
That is so fascinating because it's so true when you look back at like season 0, like what was so interesting was
Yeah.
we were all like, how could this happen?
The impossibility of
literally,
the key to
like
the car.
What we were saying, yeah, the impossibility of finding
Yeah.
keys in a wall is like this. How no?
Yeah.
There's no. This isn't possible.
And
or like our
the
place being
reason
broken
why
into.
we were doing that because we didn't have an end game.
Yeah.
Like we didn't have an end game,
We had
and
no
that's why
big
at that
picture.
time
It
it was
was just
so
like,
much
what?
easier to come up with mysteries because we weren't confined by where it needs to go.
We didn't have a world to
Interesting.
fit
That's a
good point,
into.
actually.
Yeah.
I never thought about that.
We've built this season we have more of a defined world that we have to niche into and,
Yeah.
and fit
Yeah.
our story into. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good
That's
point.
And I'm
So
not
interesting.
I'm not a mystery writer.
No.
You know what I mean? Like I'm not a mystery writer. Like we started this Project 863, and that's been like pretty much my first foray into mystery. So like, you know, like there might be some people watching that are like, oh, you know, like how can you not know the definition of mystery? Well, it's like, I mean, like that's not what, you know.
It's because there's so many things that are labeled mysteries, so you get this generalized view of
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
what a mystery
Like,
is,
oh,
and
yeah.
it's like, oh, it's just a mystery.
Every
You don't have to
mystery-
define it. It's just is what it is.
To a T, I feel like every mystery written that's popular is like, oh, there's a murder. Oh,
Yeah.
it's like that's what I like about what we do is it's like it's a mystery, but it's not this cliche. Oh, a murder, but we don't know how. We're gonna investigate. It's
Or
like
we don't know
It's
who.
like really strange occurrences that are like relatable, like that really spark your curiosity that you didn't expect and like hit. You know, it kind of
Well-
gives goosebumps without all the terror. You know, it's like oh
Yeah.
like the
Even
mask episode.
terror. Yeah.
Yeah, Goosebumps is a lot of terror.
But even when
Oh,
you think
yeah,
about
yeah.
that, like, because I just filmed this morning a video for Behind 863
Yeah.
reacting to the window shattering. And, like, that really resonated with so many people because they were like, that's what? There was no one in the room.
Yeah.
Like, this window just shattered. Like, that's not
Yeah.
possible. What happened?
Yeah.
And, like, thinking about that, thinking about, like, the other thing that, you know, the audience really held on to for such a long time and was like, how does this happen? How does this happen? Was the serum leaking and burning through the ceiling and onto the floor. It's something that is just like, yeah,
Yeah.
no,
It's
that's not
so-
possible.
it's Chef's Kiss
it's
looking
just,
back.
it's not possible.
Yeah,
And like,
exactly.
that's why it was so like,
Yeah.
It was
What?
it was easy too to like the mystery itself was the hook into this whole thing. And like the mystery wasn't really yeah, on your part it was planned, but like I guess the point I'm trying to get at is like the mystery that came about the first like season 0, season 1 was very, very natural and
Yeah.
was it was just like it could have been anything. Could
Yeah.
have been anything.
Yeah. So that's really the direction that we're trying to go back to. We're trying to get we're because I'm thinking and I'm hoping that, you know, this resonates with the audience watching this right now is, oh yeah, that's what was great about season 1, right? Because a lot of people will say a lot of different things, but it doesn't really zone in really on like why some people have stopped watching, why it was magical before. And I think the realism of like, you know, we're actually YouTubers and like we have day jobs and we can't just go investigate this right away. I have to go to a meeting, but after, how about that? You know what I mean? It's like really, really real, coupled with what the heck is happening over
Yeah.
there and how do you explain it?
Yeah,
and I think
exactly.
that's a good point too, and that's where it's difficult on our end. We've struggled with this forever as creators. I think at Spellbound High Five, which was we get really, it's difficult because we want to go to the audience and ask why did you stop, but what we have
They're gone. They stopped.
they stopped, yeah. And the
Yeah.
people that have come back, they're like people don't know why they've stopped because of this reason, in my opinion. You guys can maybe give your insight too, but when people know why they've actively stopped, it's because there was something that actively happened,
Yes,
right? For instance,
absolutely.
like some like
And not like a
legal
slow
issue.
creep.
Exactly. But there's when you're watching because of something subconsciously, you subconsciously stop watching, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's something that took us a long time to really figure out is what we bring in terms of the attraction of a lot of our videos is there's a subconscious tick, there's a click, there's an intrigue, right? That's why it's so hard to explain. When you tell someone, I've done this for a long time and I was on the other end of it, when I'm like, hey, give me some thumbnail products for Dope or Nope, no one can ever find one. No one can ever find one that's like, I like that. You know, it's because people always think it's something that's weird or goofy or different, but it's not. Like it's a there's just something when you see it, you know, and you have to like build that,
Yeah,
you know,
into it.
And so on that same realm, it's the opposite side is the viewer who's receiving that and getting that subconscious, like really huge like hit of intrigue, you know? And so when that intrigue's low, the audience drops out. But what they'll say is a billion different things. You know, this person wasn't in it for this long, or this person was that. And it's like, yeah, I'm not saying that didn't poorly affect the video, right? But there's a lot of subconscious things that battle with that.
Absolutely.
And so that's what's so difficult when we ask the audience is like, hey, why this? Like, what didn't you like about this? What didn't you like about that? And they can look at active things that we've done and say stuff like that. But that doesn't mean that's the answer. And
Yeah.
we've done those changes. Like we've changed so much, but a lot of times the results don't change. And it's because there's something else at play. you
Yeah,
know?
absolutely. And I think like a great example of that is in the video when I'm watching, you know, I'm behind 863 when I'm watching old content and I'm like, I think it's missing realism. Then everyone like in the comments was like, yes, it's missing realism. But like the strange thing is, I hadn't seen a comment
Once about that. yeah.
once about it
Yeah.
missing realism before that, right? But I think it's just like that's it.
That's
You know,
it.
people
That's
become
what I was
aware of
looking
it,
for.
even though like subconsciously or they're totally aware of it, right?
Yeah.
It's just this thing that like when you're watching it, you know, like we all do it. We're all watching a show, and then eventually we just stop watching, and then you kind of wonder. What was the one day I stopped watching and
Yes.
why? I always think about that. It's
Yeah.
like like Luna, for instance. One day, never watched Paw Patrol again. Why? That's so interesting.
She stopped watching.
And
Paw
I
Patrol?
think it
Rest in
has to do
peace.
as well with like, you know, when the audience they all gather in to comment, like it's definitely like because blah 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 left, or it's because you guys stopped doing
Yeah, like an
this.
event. Exactly.
You guys stopped doing this this certain
Format change.
this format, but like there are underlying root problems to why those format changes those format have changed, why that person's not there anymore.
Yeah.
And the audience usually don't know those things.
Yeah, and they can't really. It's not a lot of, even though it's hard. It's really complicated because like this is a strange new territory in media where it's like it's a relational based content, except that there's privacy involved because
It's a
you know,
workplace.
it's a workplace, but also the fact that it's like we don't actually know each other, so it's just really strange. It's really
Yeah.
strange where it's like, you know, you're hanging out with your friend every day, and then your friend's all of a sudden, I'm leaving, and I can't tell you why.
It's
Like, of course that breaks your heart.
Yeah.
But it's like that's the weird nature of it to just add on to that.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think that's where you guys, as an audience, I would recommend challenging yourself and really look at the content you consume and ask yourself, why do I actually watch this? And see if you can get more specific, like truth-wise, other than just like, I'm just interested in it. Like, it just intrigues me. Because you can
Yeah.
come up with a lot of answers, right? Like, if I were to like go to a Shane Dawson video and be like, what really gets you about this? They might be like, comfort, and like, yeah.
I
But
just like people. I
yeah,
like
yeah,
the
but
people
like
in
other
it.
things make you comfortable. Like these people make comfortable content. It's like there's an intrigue that they tap into. And if
Yeah.
you're a person trying to make content, I would say focus. And maybe you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not saying the active stuff isn't important too, but like for longevity, what I found is finding subconscious intrigue that sustains. I guess
Yeah,
like
I mean that's
like an active thing is like a collab. You know, like a collab is an active way to bring in a viewership, right? Because you're bringing in this other person and you're bringing in their audience, they're witnessing you. But the second the problem is the second that friendship stops, for
Yeah.
instance,
Sure.
where does that audience go? Like some of them might stay, you know, because
Yeah.
maybe you've had some intrigue in there with you. But for instance, if you bring in someone for a collab, but you have no intriguing content, you're gonna keep nobody.
yeah.
That's like proven all over the
yeah.
internet, right?
Yes.
So it's like focus on just getting that intrigue, I think.
That's an interesting process too to like go through. Like, why are you watching trash TV? Why are you watching documentaries? Why are you watching cartoons? Like, what are these? When you sit down to watch these different types of content, are you sitting down in different moods?
Yeah.
Are you sitting down with different expectations? Or do you have like time to kill? Do you have like, are you looking forward to this? Why are you looking forward to it? It's kind of like you see a lot about yourself
Yeah.
in it too.
Yeah.
That's interesting that you brought that up. I've done that before, and it's kind of eye opening with like my content that I make. You know,
It's a huge fear, I think, for me too. I think for a lot of people, go back and watch people. I mean, we have a lot of people who don't work here anymore. Go back and see like the content they make now, and like take a look. Like I do that a lot with my own content, right? Like sometimes the most intriguing thing about the content you make is like where you're working, right? And I think that's a huge fear for people
Yeah.
who make content. You know, like here is
Yeah.
I talk to
Sure.
people like I remember myself and Paul, who I feel like we've made really good content, you know, together and separately. And our biggest fear is like, dude, are we going to be able to do this without High Five? Could we do this without High Five?
Sure.
You know, at the time, Spellbound.
Yeah,
now.
everyone watches for different reasons. I think it's super, super important to raise into consciousness the product of what you're creating, right? And what I mean by product is not the product is videos. That's not a product.
No.
That's a commodity.
What you're
right?
offering people.
Like, yeah, what are you offering people? And content, it's usually an experience. It's usually an emotion, right? And so the emotion or the experience that you're offering, like, can you get really clear about that? And that's the journey that we've been on, honestly, for, the past 6 months or something, is like, okay, really surfacing why were people watching before? What's that product, right? And for a while there, we were like, oh, maybe like we thought it was thrills and chills and like danger and intrigue. And we really started experimenting with a lot. And season 2 was definitely a huge experiment in terms of danger and thrill, but realizing that's not it. That's not the product. That's not it at all.
For a lot of reasons.
And then now I'm thinking, coming out of that, I'm thinking that the product is closer to mystery and relatability, mystery and realism, right? And I wouldn't even say it's realism. I would say it's mystery and like comfort, friendship type stuff. Like,
I
Comfort is a
Scooby-Doo.
commodity.
I mean, I
Yeah,
think like,
sure.
yeah, with the, like, well, Scooby-Doo
Scooby-Doo.
kind of taps into that as well, and like it's interesting with like a mystery because like there is that like subtle uncertainty, which to an extent, like depending on how much uncertainty you have and how personal it is in your life or outside of your life, you can be attracted to that. Right, like depending on the variability of like what that uncertainty is, and I think like what we have to offer to our audience is that uncertainty in a like comfortable aspect, comfortable in the sense of it's not their uncertainty, but more so comfortable because people they relate with, people they love, are in it, and they're like surviving.
Yeah, and
exactly.
it's entertaining to watch them go through it.
Yeah, that's a critical point too, is that we have to maintain this connection to really what I think the audience is engaging with, which is us modeling how to survive through uncertainty, right?
Yeah,
and I
we've
think that's
talked about that too.
Yeah, we've talked about that a lot, about how this is one of the reasons why you watch movies, why movies are so engaging, is because you're literally face to face with danger, yet you're safe.
Yeah.
Right? You're face to face with what you feel is threatening, yet you're totally safe. And so basically you get to experience all this danger without actual threat, without actual losing anything whatsoever.
Without risk. No
risk.
Without risk. Thank you. You get to just step up right close to it and see it as close as you possibly can, as clear as you possibly can, and then walk away unscathed. And that's really what content is at the heart of it. And what's really, really interesting, in my opinion, is that what people don't realize is if the content doesn't have a truth, if the content isn't rooted in objective moral truth, almost every person from every denomination of every religion, whether you believe or not, doesn't like it, which I think is fascinating. Right?
That's fascinating.
When you
It's
watch
fundamental.
content and it goes against a truth that I believe is deep inside of us, you are like, what is this? Right? And there's
doesn't make
actual
sense.
studies that show that shows or series, even like version 2s that of huge successful franchises, they don't handle a moral premise right, they don't handle a truth right, or they inverse the truth by saying like, yeah, greed will actually get you what you want. People are like, I hate this movie sucked.
Yeah.
Is
right?
that why there's a lot of really bad horror movies, I wonder? Like, because have you ever noticed that, like, I cannot remember the last time I've seen a horror movie get a high score on Rotten Tomatoes, critically, anything. Like,
Oh, really?
Sometimes they do, sometimes they're still beloved, like Scream and stuff like that, but I think if you still went back, they aren't doing super well critically.
Maybe
I think
like
they're
Get
just,
Out did really well.
like, Get Out did really good, I think. But it also battled a moral premise. Like,
yeah,
the
exactly.
whole movie
It
was
had a moral premise.
whole movie was like a bunch of moral dilemmas. You know?
Yeah,
So-
yeah, that is true. Like there
Yeah.
was an actual moral
maybe that's
premise
why.
there.
But then I look
What
back
was the
at
moral premise? Could you extrapolate?
I couldn't.
I have to let me play back. I remember there was a lot of moral dilemmas at stake. A
Yeah,
lot
because
of it
that's not the same
Oh,
thing
yeah,
as a
that is
moral
true.
premise.
But there
That's not the
was-
same thing as a truth.
There was a like a metaphorical moral premise at
Yeah.
play. I remember. I can't remember how to explicitly describe, but it battled a lot of like racism mixed
Mm-hmm.
with like
Expectations too of, I think, races.
yeah,
I
like
think it's an
trying.
interesting way of
They
putting
battled
it.
like free, like battled slavery in that movie because they were selling human beings.
Oh, yeah.
So it has like a lot of really like these like uncomfortable feelings. But I do remember like at the end of the movie, I was like, oh, like that kind of like
Yeah.
hit me. Like I was like, oh, there was something that really came from this. You know?
Yeah.
Like you overcame something.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
that's how I
absolutely.
do remember that there was something there. Versus whenever I watched like
Just some slasher.
some slasher, none of that
Thing.
really happens. Like Split
Yeah.
was kind of close. Like I remember I watched
Split.
Split.
God.
Split
I
was
was like trying to do something.
Split. I thought you were talking
That
about
wasn't-
Splice. I'm like, ugh. Split's
Yeah.
a different movie. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's interesting though because there are so many, especially in this day and age, there are so many like identity politics, like ideology things, like all these movies that are going into all of these like, you know, whether they're recent or not recent, like thought processes that people have nowadays,
Sure.
and they try to prove them, but it just doesn't work because either they're false, or they're not actually resonating with truth, or people are lying to themselves and they don't like it. Like there's a lot there, right? Because even, and this is what I found too, right? Even someone who's lying to themselves about the particular issue, about the particular vice that they're combating, when they see it on screen, they hate it.
Yeah, they know.
That's just how humans work, right?
Yeah.
Like the vice that we attach to is not above consciousness. Like you know it's a vice. Everyone knows deep down, like I shouldn't be doing this. I should be doing this, right? Like I believe we're all rooted in that, right? Whatever you want to call it, I believe that it's rooted in us. And so I think it's really, really fascinating when people project that vice and say, no, the vice is the right way, it's definitely the right way. But you see them interacting with other people that do the same thing and they're like, you shouldn't be doing that.
Exactly.
I think it's like
Yeah.
the two negatives make
Yeah.
a positive kind of thing. Like
No,
the
it's
negativity,
fear. No,
the
yeah.
negativity of your own pride, seeing it within yourself doesn't really do anything. But when you see it, when you remove the pride
Well,
and you see the
it's-
negativity
It's
on someone
way
else,
easier to do this
Yes.
rather than
Than it
this.
is.
you
Yeah.
think that's a
Absolutely.
pride thing or just a
No,
fear
that's
thing?
100% a pride thing. For instance,
Yeah.
let's make something up, right? Let's say I have an issue with trying to pull up real issues. Those are way too big in my head. Let's say I have an
Shopping.
issue with
Spending
shopping,
money.
spending money. I don't
Yeah.
have that issue at all. Let's say I have an issue spending money where I spend like large amounts of money and I can't get that on lock, right? When I see someone else spending a lot of money, I'm most likely going to give them advice. I'm most likely going to be like, look at that person, right?
You feel like you know better, yeah.
Because I feel like I know better and or I hate myself for doing that. You see what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Projection.
It's not exactly. And most of the time that'll usually happen when the awareness is subconscious, right? Like if I'm repressing or suppressing those urges and I don't know what to do with them, because that's why it's so much easier to do this. Because if you're doing this, it's scary. It's really, really scary because inside your brain is really volatile because you don't know what to do, right? Like you have to have answers, right? Because we're not taught in this society to exist in the unknown. We're just
Yeah.
not taught that. We're not taught how to deal with uncertainty. We're not taught how to handle like the unknown, like circumstances that don't have answers. We're not taught to just sit with pain.
I think it's weird how even on the flip side, I don't think we're taught how to like respect and appreciate ourselves either. For instance,
Oh, I agree with that.
You know how like I think like a huge thing I've heard a lot from like therapists and stuff is they tell you to like look yourself in the mirror and like say good things about yourself, and it makes me die on the inside.
Well, that's actually not good though.
well knowing like your virtues is important. right?
That's true. But
Yeah.
I'm saying affirmations, like self-affirmations, right?
Why would self-affirmations in itself just be bad?
Self-affirmations are bad because it does the exact same thing. So think about it like this, right? When we're talking about the ego, the ego is basically an illusion of the self, right? It's basically how I think I need to survive, right? So I build up this mental image of myself in order to interface with people around me in the world, right? And so when someone says something or does something that hurts the ego, it hurts me because my identity is put in all these various things outside of me, right? And so let's say self-awareness or transcendence or sanctification or anything like that, the process is actually closer to removing of the ego entirely, right? It's removing the illusion of self rather than defining self, right?
Yeah,
You
that's
follow
true.
me?
I've heard that a lot.
So
and
the reason why affirmations, it depends on how you do them and it depends on how you say them, right? Because the brain does work like that, right? Like you can have success with affirmations, but again, you could have negative success with them too.
yeah, you could also push deeper into your other issues, which is true.
And so the reason why is because pride, right, is a function of like inflation and deflation. A lot of people think it's just about inflation. So what I mean by that is a lot of people really can see pride when someone's like got a big ego, right? And we'll say a big ego because they think highly of themselves, right? They think really highly of themselves. They think they're hot stuff. They can never do anything wrong. And you're pointing at that guy being like, that guy's got an ego, right?
Sure.
But you never look at the dude over there in the corner that's like beating themselves up, that hates themselves, that can't stand themselves, that wants to kill themselves, right? Like we don't look at those people and say, oh, they have a big ego. But that's what it is. It's an ego,
Yeah.
right? It's
an
the ego,
unbalanced
the
ego.
ego. Yeah, it's an unbalanced ego, right? Because the ego serves to protect the self, right? And the more you disconnect from the self, the more stable and secure and I would say like unwavering your spirit is, right? And so in affirmation, right? The issue with affirmations is you're still focusing on yourself. That's the issue with affirmation. The way to move beyond, again, these are all my beliefs. The way to move beyond. It's okay.
Sorry.
The
Sorry, I don't care about your beliefs.
Your Apple Watch.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm gonna cut you off.
I'm gonna have to
real
cut
quick.
in and push back.
Yeah.
Tim Cook.
So like the way you move beyond that, the way you transcend, the way you sanctify, the way, you know, like you could argue all of that from a, let's say, a secular perspective would be to remove ego, not to inflate it or deflate it, right? So a lot of people think, oh, big ego, we should deflate his ego. We should tell him he's nothing. We should do this. We should do that to like deflate, or the inverse, right? You know, someone that's like hating themselves. No. Tell yourself you're great. Tell yourself you're this. Tell yourself
you're
you're
right.
that.
Sure.
What it literally does the opposite thing. It's a swinging pendulum,
Yeah.
right? That's not going to work. It
And
never can work.
That's why they say unattachment is so good as well, right? It's not even just like disconnect.
it's
like
not detachment, unattachment.
unattachment. Yeah, like being able to look at yourself from the outside as well, right?
Yeah.
And knowing the difference and knowing the separation.
But that's
a good
the
point.
beauty-
That's
that's-
a very how do you describe that? I was
Well,
going to say
it's
minute,
Christian.
but that's not
it's
it.
Christian. That's
Well,
the whole.
But it's
that's
also
the whole
like
focus.
it's also Hindu. It's also Buddhist. Like they focus heavily on transcendence and separating yourself from yourself. You know, like unattaching.
What you just described.
Yeah.
I went through an ego death right at the beginning of the pandemic during the lockdown.
I
like so,
remember that.
we were out of office for like a month, and yeah, like I was on my friend's couch at like 3 a.m. just trying to sleep, and like instantly had this like profound realization, and a lot of these like fundamentals locked in, and I had like it was almost like I had lined up all my values and principles, and they were right there and organized, and it was absolutely like a death of the ego, and
or part of your ego.
part of my ego,
Yeah.
yeah, and it was a fantastic feeling. It was a short-lived feeling, maybe about like a week. You know, those if you want to keep that, you have to practice in some sort of discipline, whether it be like religion or, you know, it's up to you. But for me, you know, I was like, oh, I guess I just reached the next level.
Did I just level up?
I mean, in a sense, I did, because there's like no going back to certain ways I looked at the world. Like I can't look at the world like that anymore. But what happens with like that ego death or that ego separation is you focus on that aspect of like ego is bad, but it's not necessarily bad. It could be balanced or
Ego's just
unbalanced.
self-protection.
Exactly. You're a walking Pinterest board. You're an imagination. You're literally picking things as you go through your life, and you're setting yourself up. And I think that one thing with inflated egos, or I guess what was the spectrum you're using, like the sad guy and the
Deflated
deflated egos.
ego, yeah.
Is I think that like, it's like the ability to separate yourself from all of these things and these variables that you've built yourself upon, and not personalize with them. Like, I mean, a good example would be politics. Like, I would say the majority of people who are very passionate about a certain side are passionate for the wrong reasons. And that's not necessarily like, I wouldn't say that's necessarily something that, sorry, let me reframe that. I would say that people who are like passionate, super passionate about what side to be on, aren't necessarily passionate about the politics and how those things are going to affect people in the long run, but the personalized, you've personalized with that side, and you've like
You associate
taken on
with it.
that side, and like, that's
Yeah,
not you in any
you
way.
root your
Sure.
identity.
And
Yeah.
that's why when someone flicks it, and that's why when someone like elbows it or insults it, even though it has nothing to do with you, it's just something that you've like latched onto.
exactly.
You're like,
and like circling back to creativity, that's when like a high amount of openness is required, because if Woods, you create an idea and I look at that idea and I'm like, I don't think that's that good, Woods, right? He's going to look at me and be like, oh, okay. Because I know Woods, and his identity isn't rooted in creating.
Yeah.
It's like his value as a creator, right? It might be rooted in something else. I don't know. I'd have to think about it, but but like I know for a lot of people, they'd be totally destroyed. Like, oh my gosh, like I'm worthless. I can't create anything.
We went
like,
through that phase. Remember we went through that phase.
I went through that phase. I mean, even like I had so many moments with Matthias where like during Totally Trendy, I was like, this is just bombing. Like, I don't know what to do. And like, I would just feel like, I remember a very specific conversation where like my key takeaway was like, okay, Samantha, if what you work on fails, that doesn't mean you're a failure. Like, and that's still a sticky note that I have on my computer in my office. Like, because it's just that, especially when you care so much about what it is that
Yeah.
you're doing, it's so easy to have that level of attachment of like, okay, well, like I'm doing this, right?
Yeah.
And so
just like
if it
really,
fails, like that's
having your
on
identity
me.
sink into it, right?
Yeah.
Like just that attachment.
Yeah.
Is like gripping it really tight, right? There's that analogy of like gripping something so tight that you actually suffocate it. And that's the idea of like rooting your identity in something. That's the idea of becoming so attached to something that you can't live without it, right?
Yeah.
But you don't actually move beyond that. You get yourself stuck
Yeah.
because you're so attached to this idea, or the need for this to exist, or the need
Yeah.
to have that, or the need for things to work out, right?
Well, and that's such a great point too, because even just in talking about Totally Trendy, like that's so true with what I went through. Because
Yeah.
the second you were like, well, I actually want you to come over on M Vlogs with me, I was like, oh gosh, like okay, like I knew I instantly wanted that.
Yeah.
But I still had some attachment to Totally Trendy. But
like,
then like,
did I fail? Is
yeah,
it- is
like
that on
did
me?
it fail?
Like, yeah.
But like I would say after the first month, and especially looking back at it now, it's like I'm so much happier now
Yeah.
than I was doing Totally
Yeah.
Trendy. Like, but
Yeah.
I was gripping onto it so
Yeah.
tightly that like I didn't let myself separate from it to
Yeah.
then go like, oh yeah, no, I wasn't all that
Yeah.
happy.
Same with my channel too.
I think the problem though with this idea of like transcendence or self-awareness or dissipation of the self is that it's really, really, really easy to think you're doing it when you're not, right? And this is what this is what I see people do a lot, right? Whereas like, oh, okay, I realize I don't need that, or I realize, like even Wood said it a second ago, he said like, oh, I leveled up to the next level, right? But that's still a focus on the self, right?
That was my point being is like, oh, my ego's gone. I've leveled up. And then right there
Is
was
ego,
the
yeah.
step back down. So absolute. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's what's so strange about the human brain and like our need or desire to root our identity in things external, right?
Yeah.
And not the spirit, right? Whereas like obviously what I believe is that you root your identity in God because God is unchanging, God is perfect, God is everlasting, God is, totally sovereign, right? And so when you root your identity in something stable, you become stable as a result,
Sure.
right? And the process of sanctification is often that. It's often like the purification, right? But the difference between, and again, I don't know those other religions, but what I know about like being a Christian is that process of sanctification is the process of purifying or refining away all of the impurities, right? Within your beliefs, like all the lies you constantly believe that your ego is constantly attaching to, instead of the reliance on God, instead of the reliance on that perfection outside of yourself. You think you need to attach to something and control something in order to exist, right? But the bigger piece, though, is that your identity is outside of yourself. Let me rephrase that. Your identity is in your spirit and within God, right? So what ends up happening is it's not about you anymore at all. It has nothing to do with you. And that's like the whole point, is like even other religions kind of fail to see that sometimes, where they like, oh, unattached, so I can be stable, so I can do this, so I can do that, which
For
is
themselves.
It's still ego.
Yeah.
It's 100% ego still. And so you can absolutely be a Christian and like be the most egotistical person because you're not actually following the word of God, right? Which is interesting, because you get into this state where you think like God is there to help you. You think, like the prosperity messages and things of that nature. You think God is there to like guide you. God is there to like help you down your path. God is there to help. No. Like, and not only that, God doesn't even need you. You see what I'm saying? Like, I was told this. I went to a lunch with a really great Christian man, and I was asking him business advice, because this guy's wildly successful. Like, whatever you think, triple it, right? He's successful. And he was telling me, he was looking me square in the face, and he's like, why do you think, like, why are you doing this business? And I'm like, I don't know, like I'm all nervous and everything like that. And he's like, God doesn't need you. God can do whatever he wants. God can, like, if God wanted to take away your business but give you manna every day in front of your house, he could do that, right? And it was like such an eye-awakening moment where like I had this big burden on my shoulders that I was like, oh, I gotta like save jobs, I gotta do this, I gotta do that. I gotta be an evangelist like for God, rather than, well, wait a second, he doesn't need me.
Yeah.
He doesn't need me. Like, he's doing this for me. You know what I mean? Like, he's literally connecting me to him for me. He doesn't need it, right? Like, he exists whether I exist or not. And so like that's like a big realization, going back to the ego piece, where it's like it's very much like, oh, okay, I'm here to help others. That's all. That's the only reason why I'm here. That's it. And it's not to like save other people. It's not to do anything other than to like glorify God through loving him and loving other people more than I love myself, right? And I think that's where, and I'm not saying I'm good at that. I'm just saying, like, oh yeah, the Bible says that, and that's what transcendence will look like, right? Where you like meet people. You guys have probably met people like that in your life, where you're like, dang, how is that person just like holy, dude? Like, you just kind of want to be that person, it's like they're just happy all the time, they're just good, they're just helping, they're totally like abundant mindset, abundant life, and you're like, why do I hate them a little? You know what I mean? You're like, oh, wait a second.
Yeah.
And so I think that's like what's so interesting is you get into that space where it always comes back to you. And I think like being human is just a part of that process, right?
Sure.
Of just like, as you grow older in wisdom, you're like, oh yeah, it's not about me. That's right. It's not about me. You like wake up every day, remind yourself it's not about you,
Yeah.
But like for me, that's,
And it's difficult because you're you.
because you're
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
Because
like,
you have your
it's
voice
so
in your
bizarre.
head. Like,
You
How
are
do
really
you-
all you know.
How do you disconnect from yourself?
Yeah.
It's such a, it's a philosophical question that's plagued people for millennia.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
sorry. I just realized Tanner doesn't have any shoes on, and that just made me laugh.
Yeah, I like to kick it a little free over here. You know what I'm saying? I like to.
He's
kick it a
really
little free.
disconnecting from himself.
Yeah.
You know?
For possessions, I don't need these worldly
It's like,
possessions.
I don't need
By the way,
these
who wants
shoes.
to smell my feet? You know?
Why
They
would
used
you
to
say
smell really
that?
bad.
Huh?
What?
They do?
I'd probably
No, they
smell them
used to.
now rather than like years ago.
Yeah, a couple
your
years
feet
ago?
were bad.
They were so
Oh yeah,
bad.
I was just sweaty like a few years ago. A few years ago was weird. Yeah,
A
Weird
few
time
years
for
ago
Tanner's
was
feet.
crazy, man.
It was a crazy time for my feet.
that's what I was gonna say too. Is I remember like we've just as studio. Yeah, I can say that. As a studio, I think we've just grown a lot, you know. And I remember because talking even just about like creativity and like how we communicate that. I remember when I was like doing when Paul and I were doing like the supervising producer stuff, we were like super worried about creative safety. And I remember that feeling so wrong, but I couldn't quite word why, you know?
I remember.
And it finally clicked that for, I think, us as a company, where it's like, we shouldn't be dulling our swords. We should be like boosting our armor, you know? And it doesn't mean we shouldn't like
What do you mean?
Like we shouldn't. We were trying so hard to be careful about how we're saying what we want to do creatively, and trying to be tiptoeing around creative ideas, right? Like I remember we asked in a meeting, has anybody here felt like creatively
Unsafe.
Yeah. And I know someone who like came out and said like that I wasn't creative safe, but it was just because I didn't like one of their ideas, and it was like somebody I was really close with at the time. Not going to put them on blast either. And I was like, yeah, I mean, I guess I did the same thing with them, you know. I'm not going to say like I wasn't hurt from other people too, but so we kind of like leaned into this direction, like, hey, like let's be more careful about like how like what we say about other people's creative ideas and stuff like that. And
Well,
it's like, and to a T, that's kind of true. Like you obviously can't go around being like a
Yeah,
jerk.
like-
but when you're speaking in a creative environment, like we should be. I don't want to say should, but I want to at least be wearing my armor, like wearing the thickest armor I can, so that like when I put an idea out there, like I know that I'm not attached to that idea. But I also want to be able to throw ideas out and know that people are going to give honest feedback.
Yeah,
you know?
I think what
I don't
was
want people to be
missing-
so afraid of like hurting my feelings that they just yes man me. Like no, I
Yeah.
want the best. I don't want the tiptoe. And I think there was a balance there that we leaned too much in the opposite direction, where everyone was
Possibly.
just not saying anything. Like and I was like, what is
Yeah,
that?
I think what was missing in that season was trust. There was no creative trust, and I think that's why some, like feelings were hurt, and it was hard to be like,
Well, I think in the defense of some of the people whose feelings were hurt, there were people that didn't know how to give creative feedback. Like,
Yeah,
straight
exactly.
up. Like because a lot of people don't realize you can give creative feedback without being judgmental.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like,
Absolutely.
But then on a different front, there's a lot of people that were overly sensitive creative, where you were saying like, okay, why did you choose that? You know what? I don't think this is going to work. And they're like, he doesn't like my idea. Where it's like, that's not judgment, right? Like that's just like, we're not going to use this idea. We're going to go with this one. Right?
And in the same note, I mean, we've obviously gotten better at creative feedback too. I will say that. But like now, if we went into a creative meeting, I wouldn't feel bad. I wouldn't try so hard to think about how to say like if I do or don't look like an idea. Like that's just like compared to then. Like I had to really feel like I almost had to write down like what I was going to say.
I don't remember going
Sure.
through with this.
I do.
I do.
I remember it being a
I
big
do.
thing, and
Yeah.
now I
might
don't
have
feel that
not
way.
been.
Like if I don't like one of Woods' ideas, like I'll tell you. You know, I'm
Yeah.
not, and I know it's not going to hurt your feelings because I'm like I trust you. You know,
Exactly.
And I think
Like,
you
we
trust
have that
Like I
Yeah, and
will.
I trust
creative
you
trust,
to-
and we have that like trusting environment now because we don't have people
But we
who
want the
will-
best,
who
you
will
know?
just I think there are a lot of things that are different. We have a
Yeah.
common goal, we have that element of trust, we also all know how to give constructive criticism.
We're not trying to prove something to each other.
Yeah,
you know?
there's
Exactly.
no like competition.
Yes,
Like-
competition is toxic.
That was huge. Yeah, that was another big thing that's I think's been removed. Is it doesn't
Yeah.
feel competitive anymore. It feels very
No.
collaborative. Like this is the most collaborative the studio's ever been by
Yeah.
a long,
Yeah.
double, triple what it's ever been.
Oh yeah, and we don't even think about it anymore. We're not
No.
thinking about being collaborative. We just are.
I remember
Yeah.
somebody came up to like when Paul and I were like supervising producing. Somebody came up like, "Hey, I just want to climb. You know, I just want to climb like the ladder." I was like, what? I was so confused. I was like, climb the ladder. I was like, they think we're like Facebook. Like, what do they think we're doing here? You know?
Trying to be CEO or what?
levels.
But he wasn't the only person. Like they weren't the only person that was just trying to climb. You know, everyone was like trying to
Sure.
compete and like trying to like I
Sure.
want my name attached to the best so that I can like grow in this company. And it's like man, this is like. And now we're not like, hey, how do we make the best stuff? Like, how do we make this really good? Like,
Yeah.
how, like
Yeah.
what can I be doing better to make my work better? And like,
But I think I think a large portion of that is that we're all much more creatively open, right?
Yes.
And not to say that everyone that's left wasn't.
Correct.
Not what I'm saying.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
There were some people that's left that didn't know how to give creative feedback, that were incredibly judgmental and didn't know how to provide, constructive criticism. And there was a lot of people that didn't know how to take constructive criticism. So there's a lot of pieces there.
I think that was the big thing. I think it was. I'm not saying it wasn't also give, but like I look at like creative environments, and even then, like I mean, I was in a lot of these meetings and conversations,
Yeah.
and even then, like the creative feedback that was given too harsh, like I know what's happened at like other creative companies. I'm like, mean, we were still like saints. I just think like I think like people. I think we didn't have like this big meeting to tell people like this is how you're supposed to take creative feedback. Like like when someone like and it's hard. It's like you said,
You
you
gotta
associate with your
critically
ideas
think
until
about
you
it.
don't. It takes a long time to learn not to associate with an idea. You know.
Yeah.
Took
that
me
comes
forever.
with experience,
Experience,
and
for
that's one
sure.
of the issues is that a lot of the people that we hired were not experienced, and
For sure.
that comes along with it. You know what I mean? So it's not a shock that they weren't those individuals were not capable of handling that constructive
Feedback.
And
criticism.
there's some that were great. Like, so like better than I felt like I even am now at taking creative feedback. You know, or I look back, I'm like, and I think about them a lot. I'm like, man, what would they like say in this situation? Or like, what would they do? How would they take this? You know, even when it was hard, like even when I said something, I was like, man, that felt mean. They were just like, yeah, okay, thanks, man. I was like,
Man, that felt
I was like,
mean.
dang, dude, like that was awesome.
It was also tricky too, because like you were you and Paul at different times were my supervisor, and like I remember being just bumping heads with you and you. I mean, not.
I remember you and I bumped heads creatively a lot.
Yeah, we all bumped
well, I
heads a
mean,
lot.
like that was the
That's
thing
what
was I on one aspect I associated with this channel that I was on, like I
it was
took it in.
Your name, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
True.
but like taking in the feedback was something that like I had to. It wasn't necessarily like handling it like emotionally or like with my feelings, but understanding where it came from in the sense of like one, if someone gives you feedback, you don't have to fold right there.
Yeah.
like you don't have
Absolutely.
to be like. "Mm."
You're allowed to believe that. Yeah.
Yeah, you can
you're allowed
like
to
stick
be like,
to your
I don't
idea.
agree. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Take it and be like,
absolutely.
yeah, maybe I'll get another opinion. But like, also, you have to understand where that's coming from. If you're like super hyped about this idea, like, are you super hyped about this idea because it's going to benefit the company really, really great, or is it because it's going to like make you look like a creative god? You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
or
And so-
you're going to
Sure.
benefit out of it,
Or
or
I'm
it's
gonna
going to be
benefit-
fun for you,
It's
and it's
just
not going to
for
help
you, yeah.
the
And those were the-
company, or you're going to get something out of it.
Those were the two things I had
Yeah.
to I had to struggle with is like, okay, like, this is a bomb video, Tanner. So what is wrong with you? What do you mean? Like, what do you mean,
That's the
dude?
thing from that time period too. Is a lot of people think like we enjoy doing that. Paul and I would
I
meet
know.
after those, and be like, dude, these meetings are the like. I remember Rats meetings, right? And I would go in there and like they'd throw ideas, and I'm like, and you weren't even in a lot of them because you were actually building. You were like stuffed building a lot of stuff. But I'd be in there with like the rest of the crew, and I'd be like, man, these just don't hit. But like, what do you tell guys? Do you tell guys like, hey, like these don't hit, or like, do you let them go for it? And there's a lot I let them go for, And it's like, but you don't. No one wants to be the creative judge. Like that's not
Yeah.
the fun. I want people to make great stuff and cool stuff.
But overall, I mean, yeah, like, were those ideas going to benefit the company? Because that's why you're here,
Yeah.
right? You have an ability to benefit the company. That's why you're here.
Yeah.
So, is it that, or is
Yeah.
it for
Or
your
do you
own
just
gain?
wanna do
is
it?
it because
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
you
it's like,
think
that's different.
Yeah, like
Yeah. You
wanna
you
shoot
just
poop
want
out of a
that on
toilet
your
can,
resume. Yeah.
Yeah.
Pardon me. Tell me that idea was never on the table.
It was a poop emoji, but I was like, I mean,
I got an idea once.
Oh God.
You know this idea? I got an idea pitched to me once that was like, this is what we should do on Dope or No.
yeah,
right?
I remember this one.
They were like, we should unbox things in soup. And I was like, come again? They're like, we should have all the products in a bowl of soup and then pull them out of the soup and then unbox them.
They
I
would
was like,
get soggy.
what?
Wait,
They would get
What was
soggy.
the theme of
Was
the
there a
video?
trend
Soup?
going?
There was no theme. They were just pitching me a new video. And I was like, I don't think so. I don't think we're going to unbox things
Soupy.
in soup. But it was
What a
like,
left
some
fielder.
ideas can just be bad. That's
Yeah,
true, right?
yeah.
And like, you have to reject them. But also like what Wood said, because I remember like really, really doing that with you too, of like being like, well, bro, if you don't upload more than once a week, like I can't keep your channel.
And then my argument would be like, well, if I upload more than once, they're all going to be crappy videos. And like,
And so we were
Yeah.
this constant battle of like, yeah, like I agree with you, but there has to be a certain point where you say, this is not the only quality I'm capable of, so I'm
Yeah.
like I have to own that, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
or like work within your means. You
and
know
I
what I
wanted
mean?
to be at a better I wanted to be at a higher quality. Yeah.
exactly.
Which is frustrating as
Which
well.
is super frustrating because that's like one of the challenges that we have on Project 863 all the time, right? Is that we have to really, really meditate on where our boundaries are
Yeah.
and work within them creatively.
Yeah.
And that's, and that's ultimately like, another definition of creativity, right? Is like not getting all bent out of shape when you have boundaries, right? But actually being like, awesome, boundaries help make it
Yes.
more creative.
Let's work within them.
Well,
Like,
you
'cause you
have
can,
to, yeah.
and you can still make something really cool within boundaries.
Well, usually, usually the best stuff comes because of boundaries,
Yeah.
right? Like the most creative things come because someone did something with a boundary. Like you look at it all the time. Like for instance, in video games, such a great example of this is that like, the developers aren't like changing the game for every YouTuber. The YouTuber has to figure out how to do something creative inside the game. And so like basically like they'll flip it upside down. Like a great example is like Paul's most recent video of like doing 100 Days in Minecraft, but the world is underwater. Like he had to do everything underwater. Where it's like, okay, the boundary is Minecraft. What can you do in Minecraft that, that still will work, that'll be interesting and not just do what everyone else is doing, you know? So like you got to work with boundaries and that's what creates the creativity. That's what creates the ingenuity, I should say. Yeah. But yeah.
Yeah, I agree fully. That took a long time to discover too, honestly, that boundaries, you
Boundaries
aren't
are
creative.
good.
Without boundaries, you aren't creative, you're random. Like,
Yes.
That is
Yeah.
that is like,
Yeah.
that ticked in my head and I was like, ooh. and that's like the most, another thing you said that clings to me, that is like pure wisdom, is that truth is generally, what's the word?
Clearly, it clings to him.
Sorry, I haven't thought about it in a minute, but it clings to me. I've said this like a billion times. It's, what is the word? When
Truth.
What are you trying to say?
Is it truth?
It's not what you expect to be. It's like the opposite of what you expect
Oh,
to be.
counterintuitive?
Counterintuitive. Truth is generally counterintuitive, right? And it's like so counterintuitive to believe that like if I had all the freedom, it's not counterintuitive to believe that if I had all the freedom, I could be the most creative.
Yes,
I have the most
exactly.
creativity.
Yeah, that's what
So
a lot
it's-
of people believe.
Yeah, and so
Exactly.
you get rid of that. The counterintuitive thing is like, actually, if you have a lot of boundaries, you have to be creative. You have the
Yeah.
most creativity within
Yeah.
it.
Because you're trying to escape those boundaries.
That's why just like beliefs and lies and like how your brain, again going back to identity, how your brain attaches to lies, right, to exist is so fascinating because it's like that, right? Like the lies are the easy things to believe because the truth is hard. The truth is the thing that's like A, it's hard to do, and B, it's also hard to understand how doing the right thing in the long run will get you in the right place, right? Because the truth is often counterintuitive, but the lies are often self-defeating, right? So there's this really interesting juxtaposition between like the truth being like not exactly what you think it is, but also straightforward, but just it works kind of like not the way you think it will, but also a lie looks super straightforward, but actually comes right back and kills you.
Yeah, it's like a boomerang.
Yeah, it's like a boomerang. It's so interesting. I don't know. I'm fascinated by irony.
Yeah, I mean, naturally.
Yeah, naturally.
But yeah, I mean, guys, we could talk forever, but
Yeah.
we are well over our time. So I appreciate you guys watching this podcast. We have, I got a lot of great feedback on the last podcast.
Oh, yeah?
Woods, you weren't there for it. I'm sorry, but people have loved the last two, like proceeding more. Like they've loved
Awesome. Nice.
even more because we're just
Why?
getting. I think it's
Why?
because we're loosening up a bit. Like this one, I came in here with a couple talking points. We didn't talk about either of them, and I'm okay with it. And I still know what I'm going to pull out of this for the highlight and stuff too, right?
Right.
So it's like, but it's so loose. It's just natural conversation. We're generally pretty like intellectual and philosophical, right? And so like that's what we enjoy talking about. That's what we enjoy thinking about. We love communicating, and we kind of got to do everything with that in the last few episodes. But people are loving that. People are having revelations from this. They're like emotional
Wow.
revelations from a lot of what Matt said about his own pain and stuff. That's why that's what I wanted. That's the chef's kiss I wanted from doing this podcast. I didn't want just
Pain.
like, here's an update of week 6. Like, nah. So I'm glad you guys are enjoying this style. We're going to keep doing this style until you guys decide that you hate it, which could happen. So, yeah, I appreciate you guys watching.
Yeah,
Please let
appreciate
us
you
know
guys.
in the comments what you guys want to see podcast topic-wise. We will try and follow them. And then, yeah, thank you guys for watching. Any final words from you guys?
No final words.
No, I don't
Everything
think so.
I've said has been my opinion, and you're more than welcome to hate me.
It's like it's like that Twitter bio. It's like, I do not represent the company. These are my thoughts,
Oh
my
yeah,
opinions.
my opinions.
But yeah, thanks for watching. We'll see you guys later. Bye.
Bye.